So I want to think this morning in the first session about the reason why there are canons of Dort.
我们今天第一堂先来思考为什么我们今天会有多的信经这个东西。
And there was a phrase that was used, a slogan that was used in the 19th century in the Netherlands.
有一个在19世纪在荷兰经常使用的一句口号。
We fight for the doctrine of Dort.
我们为多特大会的教义而战。
Because it's from God the Lord.
因为它是从主上帝亲自而来的。
And that was a rallying cry for Reformed Christians amidst various forms of liberalism.
这是改革宗的信徒们在许多的这个自由派的出现的时候所发出的口号。
And it reminds us that the doctrines of God's grace are always under assault.
这提醒我们上帝的教义永远是遭受着他们的攻击。
The Apostle Paul fought against legalism in his letter to the Galatians.
保罗在加拉太书当中对抗的是律法主义。
And in modern Reformed churches, we've had to fight against similar sorts of legalisms.
在今天的改革宗教会当中，我们有相类似的这个叫做盟约意向运动。
Paul also speaks against what we might call antinomianism, against the law.
保罗在另外一处也对抗另外一种错误，就是反律主义。
In his letter to the Romans, when he asks that question, if grace abounds, should we continue sinning?
在罗马书当中，他说：“如果恩典是这样的话，难道我们就可以继续犯罪了吗？”
So it might sound strange to us to put the words "fight" and "grace" together.
似乎这两个词“战斗”和“恩典”这两个词好像听起来是矛盾的。
But this is exactly what we read in the New Testament.
但是这的确是我们在新约圣经当中听到的。
Jude verses 3 and 4.
在犹大书第3、第4节。
Tell us to contend for the faith.
告诉我们要这个为真道竭力的争辩。
Because certain people have perverted the grace of God.
因为有一些人把上帝的恩典这个把它扭曲了。
And so let's travel back a little bit to the 17th century to the theological struggle that led to the canons of Dort.
所以让我们一起回到17世纪来看一下这场属灵的征战来带来的这个多特大会。
And here's our big theme.
这是我们的这个大的主题。
I should have had it on the screen there. The story of the Synod of Dort.
这是多特大会的故事。
Is one that's full of drama.
充满了戏剧性。
With an eclectic cast of characters.
有许多这个不同的这个角色组成的一部剧。
Fighting for the doctrines of God's grace.
他们都一同捍卫着上帝恩典的教义。
And as we hear that story,
当我们听到这个故事的时候，
we come to realize
我们意识到
that we also are participants in that very same struggle.
我们也参与到这场战争当中。
So, if you're taking notes, first point is this.
如果你记笔记的话，这是第一点。
The Reformation goes down to the Netherlands.
宗教改革来到了荷兰。
All good things come from the Netherlands, right?
许多好东西都在荷
兰。The fight at Dort, and I should have said, Dort is a city in the Netherlands.
OK, 所以多特是在荷兰的一个城市。
I assume some of us probably know that, some of us don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So the fight that happened at this synod, this gathering of church leaders in Dort.
在这个多特这个城市，有许多的神学家在这个时刻聚集在一起来讨论这个问题。
That was just one little episode in a much larger drama in what we call the Reformation.
这只是在整个宗教改革当中的一部分，一个小的插曲。
We typically think that the Reformation began on October 31, 1517.
我们一般会说宗教改革是从1517年10月31日开始。
But that was just the latest in a series of ancient medieval debates.
但是那一天只不过是中世纪一系列漫长的辩论当中的一个部分。
And so in the Netherlands, before what we consider the Reformation,
但是在荷兰，我们所称为宗教改革在荷兰这个运动呢
，there were various reformational movements already existing.
在这个运动之前，已经有很多的这个改革的运动开始了。
The Waldensians fled Italy, France, and made their way to the Netherlands.
早在中世纪，这个瓦尔杜派 （Waldensian） 他们已经从德国逃到荷兰去。
The Lollards in England fled to the Netherlands.
英格兰的罗拉德派也逃到了荷兰。
And in the Netherlands itself,
在荷兰本地
there was a group called the Brethren of the Common Life.
有一群人被称为共同弟兄会。
And they were seeking to simplify the medieval church in terms of its faith and its life.
他们在当时也正在试图改革教会。
And it's even said that on the eve of the Protestant Reformation,
有人甚至说，在宗教改革的前夕
there aren't any Frisians here, right?
希望这里没有弗里斯人在座。
There's always jokes with Frisians, that's why.
很多人喜欢开弗里斯人的玩笑。
Frisian fishermen living in huts.
这些住在茅屋里的弗里斯兰渔民们。
That even they could read the Bible and discuss it.
甚至连这些渔民们都能够阅读并且书写讨论圣经的内容。
Luther's Bible was translated into Dutch in 1534.
在1534年，路德把圣经翻译成德文。
And that was the Bible that was used by various Augustinian monks, including the first Protestant martyrs in the Netherlands.
这本德文的圣经在荷兰被许多人阅读，包括在荷兰最早的殉道士们。
So this region that we call today the Netherlands,
这个我们被称为荷兰的地区。
back then it consisted of 17 independent little territories.
在当时是由17个不同的独立的领地组成的。
Today we would those 17 territories would be the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of northern France.
就是我们今天所说的荷兰、比利时，甚至法国北部和卢森堡地区。
And the ruler of those 17 provinces was the Holy Roman Emperor himself, Charles V.
当时统治这17个这个地区的人是神圣罗马帝国的皇帝查理五世。
And he was very popular with the people because he didn't rule them as an overlord.
他当时非常的受人们欢迎，因为他并不是非常强制的统治者。
But he appointed a count for each region to rule on his behalf.
所以他不是直接自己来统治，而是把每个领地都任命一个伯爵来统治。
And in 1556, he retired from being Holy Roman Emperor.
1556年，他从这个皇帝的位上退位。
He went, as people in those days would do, he retired to a monastery in Spain.
他退隐到西班牙的一座修道院去。
And his son, Philip II, became ruler of the Netherlands.
他把这个荷兰地区的统治权交给了他的一个儿子腓力二世。
Sometimes we say the apple didn't fall far from the tree, but in this case, the apple fell very far from the tree.
但是就像我们经常说的，这个鸡不如凤，虎父出了犬子。
The peasants of the Netherlands despised him because he raised taxes and spoke Spanish. Sorry.
但是荷兰地区的农民非常讨厌他，因为他不但加税，而且要求荷兰人说西班牙语。
That's because Charles himself spoke Dutch.
因为查理五世他原来本身是说荷兰语
的。The Roman Catholic nobles.
这个天主教的信仰天主教的贵族们呢
they also despised him because he wasn't raised amongst them.
因为这些天主教的贵族在荷兰的贵族，他们也不喜欢腓力二世，因为他不是在荷兰长大的。
And when he tried to reform the Roman Catholic Church, it actually took away their money and gave him more money.
所以当他想要去碰触他们的时候，他们实际上腓力二世实际上是剥夺了他们的小金库。
And eventually, even the Protestants despised him because of his persecution.
但是在荷兰地区的新教徒也不喜欢腓力二世，因为他逼迫这个宗教改革。
Charles had passed laws that outlawed Protestantism, but he never really strictly applied those laws.
虽然查理五世，也就是腓力二世的爸爸，他当时已经颁布律法禁止新教徒。
Philip, though, applied them. very strictly.
但是查理五世他自己并没有严格执行这些法律，但是腓力二世却非常热衷执行这些法律。
You could not possess or read forbidden books.
所以腓力二世不允许人拥有或者阅读这些禁书。
You could not worship outside the Roman Catholic, the state church, the Roman Catholic Church.
也不可以在罗马天主教之外参加敬拜。
You could not speak openly or secretly about the Bible.
你不可以在公开或者私下场合讨论圣经。
You were not allowed to tell someone else what the Bible said unless you yourself had graduated from a university.
除非你是从大学毕业的，否则你不能够跟别人说圣经讲了什么。
Imagine the sorts of punishments for those kinds of laws.
所以你可以想象这些这法律所产生的这些惩罚是什么样的。
For males, it meant death by the sword.
如果是男性的话，他们就会被斩首。
For females, it meant being buried alive.
女性的话，他们就会遭到活埋。
And for those who refuse to confess obvious heresy,
如果他们拒不承认自己的罪
what was the medieval punishment, you think?
中世纪的刑罚是
To be burned at the stake, right?
是火刑。
If you fail to tell the local authority,
如果你发现有人这样做，但是不告发的话呢
？About a person who eventually became known as a heretic,
如果他被发现他的确是这个触犯法律了
then you would retroactively yourself be punished with the death.
所以那你也会被定罪。
So the tensions began to grow in the Netherlands in the 1560s.
在60年代，就是16世纪的60年代，在荷兰地区的这个局势变得非常紧张。
And people began to revolt and tear down the icons and idols from churches.
所以这个人们开始发起了一波这个圣像破除运动。
And in response, somewhere the reports are different, but somewhere between 2,000 and 100,000 Protestants were killed in response.
所以这个当时据不同的人有不同的记录，有一些人说是2000，有些人是10000的新教徒被杀。
But this showed the local Dutch nobles.
所以这告诉我们当时荷兰的贵族们。
That there was something going on that they needed to grasp hold of to themselves get freedom.
他们也发现他们需要去抓住一些东西来争取他们的自由。
And this rebellion came in focus with one man, William of Orange.
这一系列的这些争端，最后就集中在一个人的身上，这个人叫做奥兰治的威廉。
But the problem was that Spain was Europe's great superpower at that time.
问题是荷兰这个西班牙在当时是欧洲的一个非常强大的权力。
And so William asked his neighboring German friends to help them with military aid.
所以威廉他自己没有能力胜过西班牙，所以他就要求就向邻邦德国的路德宗的人寻求帮助。
But if you're a 16th century person asking Germans for aid, that means you got to become a Lutheran.
所以如果你是在17世纪想要寻求德国人的帮助，那意味着你必须要改信路德宗。
So William turned his attention to the south to ask his friends in France.
所以威廉不愿意这样做，他就跑到法国去寻求帮助。
And they had a great Protestant, they had a Catholic king, but a Protestant military leader.
当时的法国虽然他的国王是天主教徒，但是他的这个军队的统领是一个新教徒。
He agreed to help.
他同意来帮忙。
But he had to go to a wedding first.
但是他必须先去参加一场婚礼。
And this wedding was supposed to bring peace between the Catholic and Protestant factions in France.
那这场婚礼的目的是为了结束在法国的天主教与新教之间的战争。
Instead, the Catholics used that wedding as a chance to kill upwards of 6,000 Huguenots.
但是结果这场婚礼却成为一场杀戮。当时的天主教徒他们杀了6000名新教徒。
The little cross that I wear is this is a croix Huguenot, it's a Huguenot cross.
他戴的这个十字架是一个胡格诺派，就是法国的新教徒的标志的一个十字架。
So William turned to Elizabeth I of England.
所以威廉不得已，他要转去英格兰寻求伊丽莎白的帮助。
She was already at war with Spain.
因为伊丽莎白当时已经和西班牙人在打仗了。
So she was only able to give a little bit of money and some guns, just a little bit of support.
所以她只需要提供一些援助就可以了。
That led to political upheaval in the 1570s.
所以这个一系列的就进入到了这个70年代的16世纪70年代的一系列的战争。
Eventually, the 10 southern provinces in the Netherlands united as Catholic provinces.
所以这是荷兰原来17个省，它南部的10个省合起来。
And the 7 northern provinces united as Reformed Protestant provinces.
南部的这10个省合起来成为这个天主教的聚集地，然后北部的7个省成为改革宗的。
And so Philip, he besieged the city of Leiden, right in the middle of the Netherlands, trying to split it in half.
所以当时腓力二世在北部围攻莱顿市，想要把这个城市攻占。
William's army wasn't big enough to counterattack and to break the siege.
那威廉的军队还不足以能够这个缓解这个军事上的这个围剿。
And if you've been to the Netherlands,
如果你去过荷兰，
you might know that much of the nation is under sea level.
你知道这个荷兰很多的地方都是在海拔以下的。
So the Dutch have become very ingenious in building dikes to take water out and to create more land.
荷兰人以他们的这个筑堤坝非常这个有名，所以他们能够使水能够不进入到城市当中。
And so William thought,
所以当时威廉就想出一个办法。
We can't beat them on the ground with our army.
我们既然没有办法在陆地上胜过西班牙人，
But if we put our army in boats,
如果我们把我们的军队放到海上，
and if we break the dikes and flood the city,
如果我们把这个保护城市的这个堤坝把它冲毁，
this would be our only chance to defeat them.
我们就可以用水来淹没这个城市来胜过他们。
And it worked.
结果这个他最后获得了胜利。
In response to that, the government of those 7 provinces,
那作为回应这个北部的7省，
they were offered by William perpetual non-taxation.
这个西班牙的威廉二世就给他们一个提议，就是我不收你们税。
Instead, the city Leiden asked for a university.
然后这个莱顿可以设立一个大学。
Which one do you ask for? No taxes for life or a university?
他给这个2个选择，一个是不收税，要不然就是在莱顿建立一个大学，对吧？让你选。
If you're a 16th century person, you ask for a university.
如果你是在16世纪的话，你当然需要一个大学，对吧
？These new united provinces rejected Philip in the year 1582.
这个新的联合省在1582年拒绝了腓力二世的统治。
He was then assassinated in 1584.
在威廉在2年之后，威廉被暗杀了。
And his son took his place. His son Maurits or Morris.
所以威廉的儿子马武利斯亲王就成为了荷兰的统治者。
He was a staunch Calvinist.
他是一个非常他是一个加尔文主义者。
And a good military leader.
他也是一个非常有名的军事家。
But the head of the national government.
但是他虽然是在军事上是统领，但是在政治上，在这个荷兰的有另外一个人。
He was more of a peace person. He didn't want any more conflict.
这个人是一个爱好和平的人，他不喜欢战争，对吧？不喜欢斗争。
So they all lived happily ever after, right?
所以这个每个人都希望过着和平的生活，对吧？
Put a Calvinist with an army in a room with a guy that likes peace, and nothing good's going to happen.
你把军队给一个加尔文主义者，然后让他和一个爱好和平的人住在一个屋子里面，这不会发生什么好事。
So that's kind of some of the background to the Synod of Dort.
这是多特大会的一些背景。
Second, if you're taking notes, second sort of big heading is every story needs a boogeyman.
如果你这个第二点我要讲第2点，就是每个故事都需要一个大反派。
So decades of struggle politically, but also theologically, came to its head in Jacob Arminius.
在荷兰这些政治上的压力斗争和神学上的压力斗争，最后就汇集到一个人身上，这个人就是雅各布亚米念。
Arminius was a very brilliant student.
亚米念是一个非常聪明的学生。
And like many students in those days, his local city sponsored him to travel Europe to different universities.
在当时，如果你很聪明的话，你的城市会给你钱让你去学习。
And his travels took him to many places, including Geneva.
他就跑到各个不同的大学去学习，其中包括日内瓦大学。
And when he graduated from University of Geneva,
当他在日内瓦完成学业之后，
John Calvin's successor Theodore Beza,
在日内瓦当时加尔文的继承人贝萨，
he wrote a letter to the Dutch Reformed Church.
他写了一封信给荷兰的改革宗教会。
And said that he was a brilliant student and he was worthy of being called into the ministry.
他写了这封信，推荐亚米念，说他是一个非常好的学生，他在分辨理解事情上非常有智慧。
And so in 1588, Arminius became a pastor in Amsterdam.
所以在1588年，亚米念成为阿姆斯特丹的一个教会的牧师。
And like every good young Reformed pastor, right?
像所有年轻的改革宗教会的牧师一样，
he started preaching through Romans.
他开始从罗马书开始讲道，
But that caused lots of trouble.
但是他的讲道引起了很大的争议。
He expected his people to be more vibrant.
他希望他的会众更加的这个有热忱。
He was Dutch. You should have known better, right?
如果你是荷兰人，在这开玩笑。对，因为荷兰人出了名的冷。
And so he made comments from the pulpit like, if you won't do any good works, just go back to the Roman Catholic Church. At least they count good works there.
他甚至讲到的时候会说，如果你们不努力行善的话，你们还不如回到罗马天主教去，至少他们还会非常注重行善。
When he preached to Romans 7, he said that Paul was describing not a Christian, but an unregenerated man.
当他这个讲到罗马书第7章的时候，他的解经与传统的解经不一样。他说保罗在这里讲的不是已经重生的，而是没有重生的人。
And the reason why that's important is because Augustine said Romans 7 was a regenerate man. Pelagius said Romans 7 was an unregenerate man.
这个解经非常的重要，因为在奥古斯丁和柏拉纠的争论当中，奥古斯丁解释罗马书第7章说这是一个已经重生的人的挣扎，而柏拉纠说这是没有重生的人的挣扎。
In the year 1592,
在1592年，
so he's been a pastor now for 4 years.
他已经做了4年的牧师了。
He finally made it to Romans chapter number 9.
他终于讲到罗马书第9章了。
And he got in a lot of trouble.
他陷到了更大的麻烦里。
Jacob I loved, Esau I hated. That verse.
雅各是我所爱的，以扫是我所恶的。这些经文。
Arminius said Paul wasn't speaking of individual people.
亚米念解释说，这指的不是具体的个人。
Where some are chosen and some are not chosen by God.
他说，上帝不是说这个拣选某一些个人而遗弃一些个人。
But Jacob and Esau were describing classes or kinds of people.
以扫、雅各这里面所指的是一些这个种族或者族类。
And the church in Amsterdam had many pastors.
在阿姆斯特丹这个城市里面有很多的牧师。
And every Sunday, one pastor would preach in a different congregation.
每个主日他们会轮流在不同的教会里面讲道。
But it was all considered one church.
但是这些不同的教会的这些堂点都会被认为是一个教会。
And the most senior pastor,
最资深的这个牧师，
he protested when he started to hear what Arminius was saying from the pulpit.
当他听到亚米念在讲这些经文的时候，他就站起身来抗议。
But nothing was really resolved.
但是没有得到任何的结果。
And about 10 years later, 1602,
10年之后，1602年
the plague or Black Death came to the Netherlands.
当时爆发了一场瘟疫在荷兰。
And two of the three theological professors at the University of Leiden died.
那这场瘟疫使莱顿大学当时3位神学教授当中的2位死去了。
And the more how should I put this? The people in the government who appointed professors.
当时神学院里面的教授是政府任命的。
Who are not as committed to Reformed doctrines.
那这些人他们并不是非常委身于改革宗神学。
They liked what they were hearing about Arminius.
他们听到亚米念的这些风声，他们挺喜欢的。
And so they appointed him as a professor.
所以他们就把亚米念这个委派成为这个莱顿大学的教授。
And that concerned some of the more strict or more conservative types.
那这个任命就使得很多神学保守的这些人感到很紧张。
And so now there were two professors, Arminius and a man named Franciscus Homaris.
那现在莱顿大学有2个神学教授，一个是亚米念，一个是荷马勒斯。
And you couldn't have two different kinds of people.
你在一个大学里面不能有这2种教授。
So Homaris agreed to investigate and interview Arminius.
所以荷马勒斯同意要去这个要检验一下亚米念的神学。
And initially he said he was satisfied with what he was being told.
那他一开始说他跟亚米念谈过之后，他觉得挺满意的。
But more and more, Homaris was convinced that there's smoke, there's fire.
但是过了几年之后，他开始觉得亚米念的神学出现问题。
He was convinced that Arminius' doctrine of predestination,
他认为亚米念的预定论，
in which God foresaw the faith of some and therefore chose.
他认为亚米念的预定论有问题，因为亚米念教导说上帝拣选是因为上帝预见某些人会有信心。
Homaris believed the real issue was that that doctrine contradicted the Protestant doctrine of sola fide, justification by faith alone.
那霍马勒斯认为亚米念的这项教义与唯独因信称义的教义所相违背。
Because if faith is something that God sees the human doing and in response saves, it makes faith a work.
如果按照亚米念的这种说法的话，上帝拣选是因为他预先看见了人自己产生信心，那么这个信心就会变成一种行为。
And so many ministers across the Netherlands began to call for a national synod, a national gathering of theologians and pastors.
所以在荷兰地区有许多的牧师开始呼吁要召开全国的总会来讨论这个问题。
It had already been about 20 years since the last synod was held.
荷兰地区上一次召开全国总会是20年前的事儿。
And the church needed the government's permission to do this.
因为教会需要政府的这个同意才能够举行全国总会。
But because the government didn't want any strife, they wouldn't allow it.
而政府不希望教会发生任何的争议，所以政府一直没有答应教会去召开这个总会。
As we say, don't rock the boat, right?
不要晃这个船，对吧？政府说不要晃这个船，因为这船翻了。
Third point then. So some of the background of the synod, who this Arminius was, and what led then to the actual synod. Arminius died in the year 1609.
亚米念在1609年就去世了。
And the church was still at odds.
但是因为他的教导，使得教会内部依旧还是有这样的争执。
There was no synod. There was no gathering of church leaders to fix this.
而政府一直不让教会聚在一起来处理这个问题。
But Arminius' death didn't end the fight.
亚米念的死并没有使这一些争端停止。
So in the year 1610, 43 of his former students,
在1610年，他有一些他的亚米念的学生，
they gathered to write a document.
这有43位跟随亚米念的人，他们一起写了一份文件。
called the Remonstrance, which means the protest.
这份文件叫做抗辩书。
And their protests became known, they became known as the Remonstrants as a party.
所以因为这份文件，所以他们被称为抗辩派。
We call them Arminians, but they call themselves Remonstrants.
我们称他们是亚美念派，他们自己称自己是抗辩派。
It wasn't until 1611, so 1 year later,
直到1611年
that the more orthodox responded to this protest.
这个正统派才开始回应这份抗辩书。
So the Dutch Reformed Church was divided into two.
所以荷兰的这个改革宗教会被分裂成为两派。
There were Remonstrants or Arminians.
有一些是抗辩派。
And there were counter-remonstrants or orthodox.
另外一边是反抗辩派或者叫做正统派。
And these two sides, with the government's permission, began to meet.
这两派在政府的允许下，他们开始会面。
But again, nothing was solved.
但是他们并没有解决这个问题。
And as I mentioned before, in Amsterdam, there was one city, one church, but many congregations.
还记得在阿姆斯特丹有很多教堂，但是他们就被称为一个教会。
So if you were a citizen of Amsterdam, you belonged to the church.
如果你住在阿姆斯特丹，那么你就属于这一个教会。
But you would go to your local, parish or neighborhood congregation.
但是你主日的时候，你会去某一个教堂里面敬拜。
More orthodox believers, though, when they knew that a remonstrant preacher was going to preach, they would go to the church down the street.
但是这正统派的这信徒们，当他们知道说某一个抗辩派的牧师在这个教堂里面讲了，他们就不会去这个教堂，去别的教堂。
And this led to riots.
那这个就产生了很大的争论。
Can you imagine riots in the streets over where you go to church?
这个不仅是争论，而是发生了暴乱。
And so these more orthodox or strict Reformed Christians,
那这些很严谨的正统的这些信徒
they began to go outside of the city and meet separately from their local churches.
他们会开始离开城市里面这些教堂，他们到城外去聚会，他们开始自己的这个秘密的会议。
And there were rumors spreading that these more strict or orthodox were going to start, they were going to separate from the state church.
有传闻说这些正统派他们要离开国家支持的这个教会来建立新的教会。
In the year 1617, so when all this is going on, the year 1617,
到了1617年
Prince Maurits, he was again the leader of the army.
那之前提到的这个马武利茨亲王，他是这个荷兰的这个军事领袖。
He publicly identified himself with the Orthodox Party.
那他公开的与正统派联合。
It was reported about Maurits.
那有人报道马武利茨这个人。
That he didn't know whether predestination was blue or green.
他说他不知道预定论究竟是蓝色还是绿色。
But what color was he going to make it? Orange. He's from the house of orange.
但他说我会把这个变成橘黄色，对吧？因为他的家族是这个 orange。
So he was going to take upon himself as a politician the cause of the Orthodox.
他要用他的政治的权利来维护这个正统性。
The political leader of the nation.
那这个联合省的这个官方的政治上的这个。
A man named Johann van Oldenbarneveld.
这个人叫做范奥尔登巴内维尔德。这个非常长。
Van Oldenbarneveld, yeah. He rallied. There were 7 provinces. He got 2 of them on his side.
还记得北方这个7个省，他有2个省是听他的。
And he allowed local militias in those provinces.
那他要求在这2个省里面的这些教会们
to physically prevent a national synod, a national gathering of churches.
他让他们那个拒绝进行国家会议。
But Maurits had the army.
但是马武里斯亲王他拥有军队。
And sometimes theology gets solved by the edge of a sword, or a gun. Sometimes.
有的时候神学问题需要用军队来处理。
And so he sent his army in. They dispersed the militias.
所以他把军队派进来，就把这两个省的民兵把他们打散了。
So while all this is going on theologically speaking,
这一切都在进行，这个神学辩论在进行的过程当中。
the Netherlands was preparing for war again with Spain.
荷兰还正在与西班牙准备打仗呢。
Because in the year 1621,
在1621年的这个时候
a truce between the Netherlands and Spain was going to come to an end.
西班牙和荷兰之前制定的这个停战协议要告一段落了。
So there was great pressure.
所以这个国家有非常大的这个战争的压力。
There was civil war in the church.
在教会里面有这个内战。
And that was spilling out into the society.
这个内战这个分散在社会当中。
And there was going to be a war with Spain again.
而荷兰还要面对西班牙的这个外在的威胁。
So under all that pressure, the national government agreed to allow a synod.
在这种压力下，最终国家就同意教会来召开一次总会。
So the Synod of Dort, that's the fourth big point to think about for a few minutes.
这是我要谈的第四大点。
So all that political and theological background leads us to the actual Synod of Dort.
这一切的政治神学上的压力，最后产生了多特大会。
And what's interesting is that this was initially the idea was for a national synod of the Netherlands.
这个会议一开始是专门给荷兰举行的国家总会。
But because these debates about grace and free will, predestination, and so forth, they were going on everywhere else.
但是这个神学论题，这个预定论啊，人的自由等等这些是国际性的，就是在其他国家也出现。
King James I of England asked this to be an international synod.
英格兰的国王詹姆士一世，他要求这个会议成为一场国际会议讨论。
And so the Dutch government sent invitations across Europe.
所以这个荷兰的政府就发邀请给很多国家。
They asked for various regions to send their best theologians and pastors.
他们就邀请这些国家把他们最好的神学家派来参与这场讨论。
And they even promised to pay for the cost.
他们甚至答应为外国代表花费，报销他们的费用。
The cost was so great.
这笔费用非常高。
That an Arminian pastor,
一个亚米念的牧师说
he said after the synod was finished,
在这大会结束之后
that each of the canons of Dort cost 1 ton of gold.
多特信经里面每一条都要花费1吨的黄金。
Probably not, but he wanted to win a fight in a little piece of paper, so a tract. It sounded good.
有一点夸张，但是。
So invitations were sent to King James I of England.
邀请函发给了英国的国王。
To the King of France.
发给了法国的国王。
To the City Council of Geneva.
发给了日内瓦市政府。
To various cantons or regions in Switzerland.
发给了各个瑞士州这个城邦这些地方。
As well as various German-speaking regions like the Palatinates.
也发给了很多这个德语区的这些城邦。
That was the region where the Heidelberg Catechism was written.
比如说这个海德堡要理问答所写作的地
方。Everyone sent delegates.
所有的这些收到信的人都派了这个代表。
Except for France.
除了法国之外。
And a German region called Brandenburg.
还有这个布兰登堡的德语区的布兰登堡没有派代表。
The French Reformed Church was not able to send delegates.
法国的改革宗教会不能够这个派代表去。
Because the King of France, a Roman Catholic,
因为法国的国王是一个天主教徒。
Thought that this might be a Dutch way of starting another war.
他们怕这些是荷兰人想要开始另外一场战争的这个由头。
And so the king told the French Reformed Church
对法国国王也这个要求他们回绝说
that their delegates were free to leave.
说这个我们这些代表可以走。
But guess what? You come back, you're arrested.
但如果你去了的话，回来我就把你关到监狱里去。
What's the song? You can check out anytime you want, but you can never leave, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so... and in Brandenburg, this German region of Brandenburg,
布兰登堡这个地方呢，
they were not able to send delegates
他们没有办法派代表去，
because their most important delegate became ill,
因为他们的代表生病了。
and the ruler of their region didn't want to strain his relationship with his Lutheran neighbors.
而且他的这个统治者不想跟他周围的路德宗的邻居闹僵。
And in response to that, the Synod
做这个回应呢，多特大会回应这个。
they honored France and Brandenburg by having empty benches.
他们这个为了向他们表示致敬，就把这个空的椅子摆在那儿，法国人的椅子和布兰登堡人的椅子摆在那儿。
I should have brought a picture, but if you Google the Synod of Dort,
如果你在网上这个查这个多特大会的图片，
on the right side, all the way to the back,
在右侧最里面，
you'll see there's English delegates.
你会看到英国的代表，
Then there are empty benches,
然后旁边是摆着空的椅子，
and then there's some more delegates.
然后开始坐人。
Those empty benches were for France and Brandenburg.
这些空的椅子是给法国人和布兰登堡人留的。
The Synod then hosted 84 delegates.
整个大会这个招待了84名代表。
Ironically, they met in a shooting range.
他们是在一个军火库里面召开。
Canon with one N means a rule, right?
这个信经这个英文里面词有一个 n 是表示这规则的意思。
But canon, C-A-N-N-O-N, is a gun, right?
同样这个词加上一个 n 就变成了这个火炮的意思了。
So people have over time they've the irony hasn't been lost on them that the canons of Dort were written where cannons or guns were shot.
所以多特大会是在这个军火营里面召开的。
We don't want to be that kind of Calvinist, do we?
我们不希望成为这样的教义。
Okay, just for the sake of time, we'll skip ahead a little bit here. So there were various delegates from throughout Europe.
有许多从欧洲来的代表。
Some spoke English.
有些说英语。
Various Germanic dialects.
有一些人说这些德国方言。
Dutch.
说荷兰语。
Frisian, you got to add the Frisians in, right?
弗里兰语。
French.
说法语。
Various kinds of Germanic Swiss languages.
有一些像这个瑞士德语。
But what language do they, when they all get together, how do they communicate?
那如果这些人聚在一起，他们怎么彼此交流？
What language would they speak?
他们说什么话呢？
Latin, they spoke Latin.
他们都说拉丁语。
King James told his delegates
英国的国王跟他的代表说
that they had to do a lot, they had to get ready with various points to prepare, most importantly to freshen up their Latin.
他说你们需要在那儿好好练你们的拉丁语。
Because he didn't want anything that was going on to be misunderstood, and so his cause, was messed up.
他担心说你们用拉丁语讨论的时候，他们没听懂的话就不好。
King James viewed himself as the leader of Christendom.
这个英国国王认为他自己是基督王国的领袖。
When all the delegates came together,
当所有的这些代表在一起聚集的时候
there was an opening ceremony on November 12, 1618.
在这个11月12号，18年的11月12号有一个开幕典礼。
And there were two worship services.
有2场敬拜。
One was in Dutch, one was in French.
一场敬拜是用荷兰语，另外一场是用法语。
The Dutch for the Dutch delegates, French because everybody else spoke French.
荷兰语是给荷兰的这个代表，法语是因为所有人都说法语。
And then before the actual debate about the Remonstrants or Arminians,
在这个具体开始讨论这个亚米念派的这个问题之前
，the Synod dealt with other issues.
这个大会还处理了很多其他的问题。
They dealt with how to teach children.
他们讨论了怎么教导孩子。
What was required to prepare ministers.
还讨论这个给牧师的神学教育的问题。
Baptism of servants and children of servants throughout their various colonies in the world.
当时他们还讨论了这个在殖民地的这些奴隶的孩子的受洗的问题。
Book censorship.
这个审查书的审查制度。
Because even if you were the most orthodox Reformed theologian, you still needed permission to publish your books.
即使你是最正统的神学家，你还需要国家的这个审查才能出版书。
And they also authorized a new Dutch Bible translation.
而且他们也开始了一个这个荷兰语的圣经翻译的工作。
It's called the Statenbibel or the Statenvertaling, the authorized version.
还是荷兰的国家的翻译版。
The acts of the Synod dealing with the Remonstrance took about a month and a half.
这场大会专门针对亚米念派的神学问题，其实只是进展了大概1个月左右。
And it's interesting that every single one of these Arminians
很有意思的是，每一位亚米念派的人
were educated in Reformed universities.
都是在改革宗大学里面受的教育。
So again, it just reminds us that we even our pastors who are trained at the best seminaries.
所以这提醒我们，即使我们的牧师是在最好的神学院受的教育。
We have to always be on guard for keeping God's grace and the doctrines of grace pure.
那我们依旧还是需要维护在教会里面维护这个上帝的恩典的教育。
The Remonstrance strategy was to start debating the most controversial topic first.
那这个大会当时他们的这个战略是先要讨论这个最具有争议的教义。
And that controversial topic wasn't predestination, but it was reprobation.
那这是当时他们这个的最有这个争议的教义，并不是预定论，而是这个弃绝的教义。
Which is the doctrine of what about those God does not elect to salvation?
就是那些上帝遗弃的、没有拣选的这样的教义。
And it was controversial because amongst the Reformed, I'll mention this in my second address, there was great diversity of opinion.
这个策略是这个当时这个亚米念派他们所采用的策略，是因为在正统派当中，在针对这个教义，他们之间也有一些争议。
The Remonstrance leader was a man named Simon Episcopius.
那这个亚米念派他们的有一个领袖。
And he gave several long speeches.
他这个人叫做埃蒂斯库皮乌斯，他给了3篇非常长的这个论述。
He was trying to delay the synod as long as he possibly could.
他希望这个拖延时间，对吧？
Because he didn't believe the synod had any right to judge the Remonstrance.
因为他认为这个大会没有权审判这个亚米念派。
And so on January 14th, 1619,
在1619年的1月14日
after 6 weeks of debate,
在6个星期的这个辩论之后
after many long speeches,
在许多这个很长篇大论之后
after the government tried to get the Remonstrance to speed up,
甚至连这个政治家们他们都等得不耐烦，要让抗辩派快点。
And after all the delegates were trying to figure out, how to move forward,
所有的这些代表们都在这个想怎么才能够继续下去。
the government and the synod agreed
政府和大会和多特大会这个达成一致
that if the Remonstrance wouldn't answer questions,
如果这些抗辩派、亚米念派的人他们不回答大会的问题。
the synod would send them out and then ask them to answer in writing.
那大会就可以让他们离开，让他们用书写下来的方式来回答这些问题。
And so they were kicked out of the synod.
所以他们就被大会排除在外了。
That's very important because the Remonstrance after the fact said, they were treated unjustly.
这个很重要，因为之后亚美尼亚派会说他们没有被公平的对待。
And it's no surprise that the president of the synod,
这个大会的主持人，大会的这个主席
was a Frisian.
他是一个弗里兰人
Johannes Bogermanus.
他的名叫做伯格曼。
And he's the one who said, "Get out."
他说了一个很著名的话，对着亚美尼亚派咆哮说：“你们滚出去吧！”
He's the guy in the picture. He has the beard down to his knees. So the synod then dealt with these issues of God's grace from the writings of the Remonstrants.
所以大会最后决定用抗辩派，就亚美尼亚派他们的书写下来的这些内容来讨论这个神学问题。
And each delegation wrote their response to the Remonstrant doctrines.
而每一组代表他们自己写出自己的回应来回应亚美尼亚派的这些。
And a committee of men took all those responses and drafted the canons of Dort.
然后最后他们这个把这些回应汇集在一起，编辑成为最后的多特信经。
They worked for 8 hours a day for 3 straight weeks.
他们这个每天工作8个小时，然后连续工作了3个星期。
The synod then reconvened and adopted the articles of the canons of Dort.
然后这个整个这个起草过程结束之后，大会重新召开，然后最后通过这个。
And to show people a sign of unity,
为了彰显这个大会的这个神学的一致性，
the delegates processed down the streets in Dort.
所有的代表列队来到多特这个城市的这个大街上，
To the Grootkerk, the great church.
然后他们列队一起走到这个多特的大教堂门口。
And the canons of Dort were read in Dutch.
那这个多特信经是用荷兰文写的，
so that the public could hear them.
所以好让这些普通的民众也可以听得懂。
And then when that was finished, every delegate's name was read publicly.
然后在这个多特信经的这下面是所有代表的署名字都被用这个语言去念出来读出来。
And each delegate gave a sign of his affirmation.
然后每一个代表的他名字被读到的时候，他就脱帽表示他同意。
By tipping his hat.
他们把帽子脱下来，表示他们知道这是我同意的。
No hats today, right? We say raise your hand, right? Or we say here. They tip their hats.
我们今天举手，他们当时是脱帽。
When all the international delegates left,
当所有的这个国际代表离开的时候，
the Dutch delegates and the English who stayed,
那留下来的是荷兰的代表和英格兰的代表。
helped with making a final authorized version of the Heidelberg Catechism, the Belgian Confession.
所以他们一起规范了最后的海德堡要理问答和比利时信条。
And they gave various advice to various struggles within the church.
并且他们也回答了教会当中当时出现的一些问题。
So the big point then is this.
我这堂的最主要的一个要点是这个。
That the Synod and the canons of Dort
多特大会和多特信经
are just another episode
是另外一个插曲，是在整个这个宗教改革当中一个插曲。
in the ongoing fight for God's grace.
这场战争是我们为上帝的恩典而战。
And so, if these forefathers were willing to fight for these doctrines,
如果我们这些属灵的先辈愿意为这个教义而战，
when it was much more difficult to do so,
在当时非常艰难的一场战争。
the question for us is, when it's easy to do so, will we still take up the fight?
对于我们今天来说，我们再去做这样的斗争是相比来说更容易的。我们是否愿意站出来为此而战
Let's pray.
我们一起祷告。
Our merciful and gracious Heavenly Father,
我们最仁慈的天父，
we praise you for your amazing grace.
我们为你如此奇异的恩典而感恩。
You have revealed it to us in your word,
你在你的话语当中向我们启示，
and you have faithfully kept it in your church.
并且你信实的把这个教义保守在教会当中。
We pray that you would fill us with gratitude
我们祈求你让我们心怀感恩，
and inspire us to take up the cause of grace.
让我们也能够为此而战，
Enable us to speak the truth in love
好让我们能够以爱心和真理来说话，
and to exhibit in our lives the very doctrines that we proclaim.
用我们的生命来彰显我们所传的这个教义。
We ask in Jesus' name.
我们奉耶稣的名祷告。
Amen.
阿们。